Good morning, everybody. This is Matt Sabala. We'll get started here in just a moment. All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar in taking a first look at the Fiduciary Rule from the Department of Labor 4.0. And so with us here, we have myself, Matt Sabala. I am an Annuity Sales Director here at IAMS, and we have our Executive Vice President of Annuities and General Counsel, Chris Conroy. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, Greg. Hey, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And I know, Matt, we've had already a lot of questions on this new Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule, or DOL Fiduciary Rule, and something we've been watching really closely. So we had a new announced rule last week, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to try to unpack that, kind of give you some nuts and bolts and some things to be thinking about, and how I'm just going to be there to help you out. But back to you, Matt. I know you have a couple intro comments you want to cover.
Yep. And for those of us that have been on these webinars on a regular basis, we usually go through just kind of our value prop. We're going to keep that to a minimum today and spend as much time on the DOL ruling as possible. But I am going to run through a couple of things real quickly. It's likely that we're going to get a lot of questions during this. You can either put those in the questions box if you don't want everybody to see what you're asking, or if you'd like it to go out to the entire group, you can put them in the chat box. We will do our best to answer a couple of those questions, but more than likely, we're going to have to follow up with some of you on an individual basis. So just keep that in mind as we go forward today. But thanks again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and get this started here. Let's go ahead and start out by talking about what our new producers are doing to hit the ground running here with us at IAMS. During your first 6 months, you're eligible for our new Producer Builders program, which has several different levels you can meet. You see the thresholds there. We can do everything for you from just a simple cash reimbursement to some really, really great marketing programs we have, including and up to we can put on a few workshops for you if you hit that $1 million mark. Recently, I had a guy hit that, and he has kept his sales funnel full for the remaining part of 2023 and into 2024 by tapping into this new Producer Builders program. If you get $1 million premium with us, we can do quite a bit for you, and you see some of the other things we can do for you at those different thresholds. Just like you guys, whenever we get a referral, that is the best kind of client that we can get. You're our clients just like your clients. You ask them for referrals, we're going to ask you. If we're doing a good job with you, we sincerely hope that you refer your friends to you, and we want to pay you for that. So not only do you get a $50 check when you refer somebody to us, we write checks for thousands and thousands of dollars every quarter. The ownership here, Chris, who's on the call with us, Curtis, and Steve, and our founder, Charles Hiring, pay you guys in a big way. When somebody you refer to us writes business with us, we are going to pay you part of that premium, and you see the breakdown there. We do a couple of things really well here at IAMS. I've been around the block. I know Chris has too, and I've seen what other annuity houses have to offer. And one of the best things that we do is assign experts to follow your business from submission to commission. When you write business with us, we will have an expert with that carrier follow that business through and make sure that any additional requirements that are needed, that we are helping you get those to the carrier so you can get paid as quickly as possible. One of the best tools we have to make that happen now is electronic submission. If you're not familiar with Firelight, let us know. Your annuity sales rep or your life sales rep will help you through that process and making sure you get comfortable with Firelight. It'll tell you where you're missing information, and help that business get pushed through more quickly in most cases. Most people who use e-submission get paid on average 2 to 3 to even a week, 2 to 3 days to even a week more quickly. And several of the carriers are incentivizing people to use Firelight now with comps. They're paying you a higher comp if you use Firelight, or a spiff when you put an app through e-submission with them. So if you're not familiar with that, let us know. Your annuity sales director can walk you through that process. One of the other things I think we do extremely well is creative marketing. If you haven't tapped into this, please get with your annuity sales director or your life sales director. We can do a couple of things for you, including giving you an overview of all the different things that we can do, everything from business cards all the way up to helping organize seminars for you, getting you on the radio if you want. But we'll do a comprehensive marketing analysis and find out where the pain points in your process are. Do you need branding? Do you need marketing? Do you need to get more people in the top of your sales funnel? We'll help you through that process and come back with a custom marketing plan for your practice that we can bite off a piece at a time and get you from where you're at to where you want to be. I'm going through this stuff very quickly, guys, so forgive me if I'm missing something. Our website, though, is a very important tool to be able to help you in your practice. We've got all sorts of resources on there, including our Annuity Rate Watch, all sorts of good information in our sales tools area, canned material that you can customize to your practice, and our creative team can help you do that. Everything from slapping flyers on the windows of your office to having material to put on social media. Let us know if you'd like a walkthrough of the website and you haven't got one yet. It is a very, very important tool for many of our advisors. We're going to talk more about this, but IAMS Wealth Management is an important tool for many of our advisors to keep clients close who want to leave part of their money in a growth bucket, and also to be able to talk and act as a fiduciary. If you're considering earning your 65, or you already have that as part of your practice, and you're looking for a home that can provide you more freedom to write who you want, and also just to make sure that you're keeping those clients close so they don't have to meet with another advisor, let us know. IAMS Wealth Management is an excellent resource to our advisors. If you aren't securities licensed and you'd like to earn that, let us know. We can help you figure out what it's going to take to get you there. But if you want to just focus on what you're doing right now and you want to have somebody back you up who does have a securities license and can have that conversation with your clients, we're happy to do that too. We can go on calls with you and help keep those clients close. And if you ever decide to get your securities license, we'll flip them back to you. But that way they aren't having to meet with somebody else and you don't have the potential to lose the client from that. Real quick, we do have a couple of polls today. I'm going to launch one. We're going to make these very quick. If you'd like more information on IAMS Wealth Management, please let us know. We'll keep this open just for a few seconds. But like I said, this is an excellent resource to you and maybe even more valuable to you right now with the changes in the fiduciary ruling. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Thank you for participating. Next, and I would consider this the third thing that we do extremely well, is our training. I've been employed at the largest IMO in the country. I've worked at another one that all the people who started these IMOs around here kind of came from, and I've seen the training in the industry. Nobody does it better than what we do here at IAMS Wealth Academy, at IAMS Academy. We go through life and annuities, not 101. This is higher level stuff. Learn sales techniques and best practices from top advisors who are willing to share those ideas to help you become more successful. We will also talk about wealth management at those academies to some extent. So that's a great opportunity. If you'd like to learn more about it and see if you qualify for one of our academies, it's all inclusive. We'll fly you out. We will make sure that everything is paid for. Let us know. We would love to have you out there for that. Next, we are trying to close the year strong here at IAMS, and this is a phenomenal opportunity. Any business you write right now for Athene counts as double trip credit for our Seaside Sanctuary qualification is wrapping up for that, and our Summit by the Sea. Like I said, this is a great opportunity. Athene has some really good products anyway, so if you aren't offering those, you may be missing out for your clients just in having the strongest product to offer them. But even better, it's going to count as double the premium towards these trips. If you would like more information on that, please let us know, and we have a quick poll. There are some specifications like MIGA business typically counts as half towards these trips, so it's going to count 100% right now, while FIA business counts as double, like I said. All right, so I'm going to flip it over to Chris. Hopefully I wasn't too quick with all that, but Chris, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit more about this DOL ruling.
Well, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. And again, thanks everybody who's joining today's webinar from IAMS. You've got a topic that's top of mind for a whole lot of people. So I'm not sure you could pick up a trade journal or see one online without seeing something about last week's Halloween, October 31 fiduciary rule spooky update. That's the day that President Biden, as we'll see a picture there, actually held a press conference and talked about this rule. That's kind of a big deal to have. There's lots of rules that come out of DC, but you know, the president typically doesn't get involved in that. Yeah, there's Biden, you'll see. We'll go through that here in a minute, Matt, the kind of comments. But you know, this has been dubbed the retirement security rule. Now, really what it is the fiduciary rule 4.0. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, because we've seen 4 iterations of it. This rule, which you'd like to think, you know, Congress or in this case, Department of Labor could write it in maybe a page or 2, is actually 800 pages long, Matt. So I'm not sure if you need some nighttime sleeping, but I've actually had a chance to skim through pretty much all of the 800 pages. We're going to try to unpack this today from the lens of the independent agent who is in the business of selling annuities, whether you're a rep or advisor, but you're independent, and that focus. I'll mention a little bit about what this might mean for captive folks as well, but that's the focus today, because that's the reality is most annuities are sold by the independent channel. So it's a retirement security rule. We're going to talk about the impact on agents and annuities in particular. And the short story here is the Department of Labor is looking to significantly expand who is a fiduciary. Who is a fiduciary for purposes of meeting the requirements of the fiduciary rule? And then second is a change, pretty significant change in one of the 2 pathways to comply, which is the PTE 8424 rule, which I think a lot of people are using today. It's a relatively simple compliance pathway with a disclosure form, and that's going to be changing significantly. So we'll go through that a little bit. The biggest thing I want you to know is IAMS got your back. You know, we are here for you, intimately involved with all the trade groups. I myself just came from the NAFA Annuity Distribution Summit. This is a top of mind conversation. I and our organization have been very strong advocates for independent producers and supporting your ability to continue to operate and do the great work that you do. So we thank everybody for what you're doing to help so many consumers. So many people need great products like annuities. We know it's not an end-all be-all product, but it fits a lot of needs, as you know, Matt. I mean, you're working with people every day and day out, and you know how to help them solve a lot of those sleepless nights with some peace of mind type of products. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Just know we're an advocate and we're a resource for you. So looking at this, there's just 2 articles. I mean, there was probably 20 or 30 I came across last week. The first one, Advisor Hub, is DOL unveils new fiduciary rule as Biden warns advisors, quote, "We're watching." And he actually said that. He said, "We're going to be watching you." Another one from Bloomberg Law there that came out is Biden targets junk 401k advice, a new fiduciary rule. And you'll see a quote here on the next page, Matt, if you want to advance there. This is actually, you know, believe it or not, what Biden said. And again, it's fairly uncommon that you'd have a president go over a rule, in this case, Department of Labor, EBSA rule. But on October 31, quote, "Some advisors and brokers steer their clients towards certain investments, not because it's the best interest of the client, but because it means the best payout for the broker. Those brokers were, quote, scamming Americans out of hard-earned money, Biden added. Quote, people should be able to trust that when they get advice from a so-called expert, they're getting real help, not getting ripped off. When a person pays for a trusted advice and it comes with a hidden cost, that's what I call a junk fee. And I think it's wrong. Actually, I agree with President Biden in that regard. I think, I mean, I'm not in favor of having to pay junk fees if there's bad advice or, it's out of line. I personally, and I think this is a position I am, is that vast majority of annuities that are sold today are good products, good sales, meet a lot of consumer needs. That's been our position. We think we have a great oversight structure we'll talk about in a second here. But, the construing commissions as junk fees and inappropriate is a bit overboard. And I think we've seen that response already from a lot of the trades, and probably we'll see more of that to follow. So what do we have here? I think some people might say, well, wait a second, don't I have to jump through some hoops already? What is all this? So what you have is the Department of Labor's, quote, fiduciary rule, which again is just kind of a catch-all for the 800 pages that's out, it's just been released, plus the thousands released before that. And some people might say, well, wait a second, don't we have a rule that got thrown out of court? And the truth is that there was an Obama era rule that was vacated or thrown out in 2018. After that, the Trump administration actually had their own rule that went into effect after he left office, but the Biden administration let take effect. That was February 16, 2021. And now just 3 years later, we have a new proposal to change that rule again under the Biden administration. I like to think it was just by presidents. And that's likely to take effect here in fall of 2024. We will see. So many of you also may have to comply with things like the SEC regulation best interest if you're an investment advisor rep or you're with a broker dealer. And Matt, what would you say? 10%, 20% maybe we run across who are reps or advisors?
Yeah, something like that.
Some on that order. So some of you on this call, I know actually some of your names are advisors themselves, and you'd have to comply with that regulation best interest. This is a little bit different. And then you have the NAIC 275 model. So in 43 states, I like to think it is updated suitability. And that's more forms, a little bit more homework for documenting your sales, and that is now passed around 43 states. So really, it's not jump over one hurdle here. It's potentially jumping over three. Next thing we have is kind of our current best practices, best interest toolkit. We partner with NAFA on this. This is a great tool here, and this is something that you could use to make sure you're complying with the current regulation. Again, you're currently under an obligation to have a compliance plan for your qualified money sales. And so this is a good way of walking through that, and also the NAIC 275 new regulation. So it's another thing that we've helped kind of partner on. And so, again, I think some people even on this call may not recognize that they actually are under a current rule. And this is the Trump era Department of Labor rule that actually took effect February 16, 2021. So this did go into effect. I think it was a little surprising. The Biden administration could have wiped it away, but they did not. And during the last 3 years, I've been working on amendments to that form of it. And it was a little surprising because it put a little more burden, I think, especially on broker dealers and RIAs, to have a compliance pathway and line up with what they were doing with the SEC Reg BI. So the key point here is that rule is in effect for any of your qualified money sales, IRA to IRA, 401k plan to IRA. You do have an obligation to have right now a compliance plan. We have resources to help you comply with that. Many of you are using those forms like 8424. You might have a broker dealer that's overseeing you. The compliance guide here, Matt, and it's available from IAMS, and that again is something in effect right now. We want to kind of talk about current situation and what you need to be doing. That's got a great history there, and also a compliance form that you can use to make sure you're meeting your obligations right now. That's a sample of that compliance form. Many of you use that. If you don't know what we're talking about, I would encourage you to probably reach out to us, or put in a chat box you'd like some more information, so you're not falling outside the rules today. So where we got history here, I mentioned it's been under scrutiny for years. Well, there's originally Fiduciary Rule 1.0, and that actually got killed under a lot of political congressional pressure. 2016 rolled around, and that was the one under the Obama administration that took effect in 2016 and then had an interim compliance pathway. That actually was thrown out in court by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and ultimately that was not challenged to the Supreme Court. So that's the law of the land today. And there's some interesting language in there about the fact that the Obama administration rule kind of went too far, that they didn't have enough authority under congressional intent in order to do what they wanted to do. You might remember, if you've been in business for a while, the whole BICE, or this contract obligation requirement, that was one of the sticking points that invalidated, along with the idea that there had to be a degree of trust and confidence in order to be within the scope of the fiduciary. That piece is getting changed significantly under this new proposal. Then we had 3.0, and this is what we're dubbing the kind of Trump era fiduciary, and it was on the December of 2020. It took effect in February, and that's really what you need to be doing today. There's two pathways. There's the 2020-02, and if you have a broker dealer or an RIA, they may be using that. There's also what most people on this call are likely using, again, for any of your qualified money sales, 8424. And largely is a 1 or 2 page disclosure form. You got to disclose commissions and meet other obligations there as far as your disclosures. So it's a disclosure-based type of regime, relatively easy in comparison to the 2020 pathway. What we had to follow was some guidelines, bulletins that came about impartial conduct standards and what was called a temporary enforcement policy, not really relevant today. And now, just 13 years later, 4.0, which we're going to talk about. So nuts and bolts. There's a lot to this. I'm not trying to summarize 800 pages, Matt, but I want to kind of, from the lens of what you need to know today, as we sit here in the world of independent agents who are selling, and it includes advisors and reps who are selling annuities. And what does that mean? Again, if you're selling a security, that's going to be largely through your broker dealer's compliance regime, but this is the context of insurance products. So one-time investment recommendation, one-timers to qualified and ERISA plan, retirement plans, and their participants and IRA owners can be fiduciary advice. That's the takeaway. So we'll talk about, there was a 5-part test, it's now a 1-part test. Number 2, rollover recommendations are also covered as fiduciary advice. That's what they've clarified. So say, hey, I need to get, I think your 401k plan has too many limited options. Maybe they've retired out of it. They don't understand what they have. Your recommendations to move out of that will be covered under the scope of this rule. Next is the advisor/agent cannot earn compensation for a fiduciary recommendation, i.e. a sale, as that's a conflict of interest requiring a prohibited transaction exemption, PTE. So wow, that's a mouthful, and that's actually probably a paraphrased summary. What that means is if you want to make any money, you want to get paid any commission, anything at all from a sale, you have to have one of those pathways to comply. And one of those is 2020-02. The other is 8424. 2020-02 largely is going to be a broker dealer, potentially an RIA, potentially a bank, signing off and adhering to all the impartial conduct standards, oversight, and other requirements that they have to do as a supervisor. Really, their function is your supervisor. The other pathway, which is used today, and that's, we looked at the form there, is 8424. And 8424 is largely a 1-page, 2-page disclosure form. So Matt, once you pop up, we're curious, what are people using today? So if you're working in the qualified money world and you can use one of these two, and again, the first one, 2020-02, is where you have a bona fide supervisor who's signing off on your work. 8424 is a disclosure form. And 3, if you don't know, that's okay, or you're not sure, check that box, and we'll keep it open there for a second. But we definitely are kind of interested in what people are doing. Go ahead and close that down then, Matt. We'll go back.
Yeah, and Chris, you're probably going to get to this. But what is one of the questions that I'm getting from advisors when I talk to them on the phone is, does this mean I've got to go out and earn my 65? And so I know that may be top of mind when we're talking about nuts and bolts.
That is a good question, is whether you'd have to become an investment advisor or 65.
The rule does not require that. No, it expressly says, insurance only agents can still comply with the rule in a different way. So would that be a good advice as if you wanted to become a holistic advisor? Might make your kind of lens a little broader as you have access to other investment solutions for the clients. Yes, it would, but not required. Yeah, not required. So a big change from here at the bottom there is, before we had what was called the 5-part test. This is a lot of what was challenged in court and was thrown out by the Court of Appeals, was this idea that you had to have an ongoing, regular basis type of relationship with the client. Really, what seemed like you had to be an investment advisor rep, and you got paid compensation for that ongoing advice. So in order to kind of weave around that, this Department of Labor, who got lost in court, said, well, we're just going to say, if you see the third bullet there, who's covered, is, well, one, if you have discretionary control, you have discretionary advice been delegated to you as a fiduciary investment advisor. Number two, you say you're a fiduciary, and that therefore you're within scope. Or three, this is where it's changed a lot. You make investment recommendations, which include just selling an annuity on a regular basis as part of your business, based on individual circumstances of the client, and may be relied upon as a basis for your investment decisions that are in their best interest. So that's a mouthful. The reason, and that's actually paraphrased, the reason that the Department of Labor did that is specifically anticipating the lawsuit that's going to get filed, and they're going to be citing to that Court of Appeals decision. So trying to work around that. The takeaway there is, if you're in the business of selling annuities for retirement or for some kind of replanning, then you're within scope. I mean, it's as simple as that. So they've replaced this kind of 5-part test, which the Court of Appeals talked about trust and confidence prong, into basically a simple requirement. If you're in the business of giving recommendations to clients, you get paid for it, you're within scope. So it's kind of catch-all for everybody. Move on to that next slide there, Matt. So you got, again, you're a fiduciary if you provide that advice. It doesn't need to be ongoing. It could be one time. And that's pretty much everybody on this call, I imagine, if you're in the business making money. And you got to navigate towards one of these two pathways. Number one, 2020-02, and that's really designed for what I call bona fide supervising firms. Firms like a broker-dealer, bank, RIA, or potentially insurance carriers that have a captive field force. And there's a lot of scrutiny there. They're signing off as a co-fiduciary, meaning they're on the hook for that fiduciary standard of care, which is the highest in the law in the land. I mean, legally speaking, it doesn't get any higher, Matt. It's more than suitability. It's more than just kind of a standard care. It's the highest standard. There weren't many changes to that, largely to that regulation, and that had taken effect in 2021. The one we want to cover today, and it impacts so many independent agents, is the 8424. So you say, well, what are these weird numbers? That references the year that they came out. It came out in 1984, much different lens back then, didn't have all the products, but there was a pathway then, and there is today, to use this, disclosure-based type of regime. You had some attempt with the last rule in 2016 to change this to just declared rate annuities like MIGAs and exclude FIAs. That actually got thrown out when the rule was vacated, but there was an attempt to change that. Most insurance agents today, when you think about it, including an investment advisor reps who are selling, where there's RIAs not supervising, are likely to use this. And they're likely to use that 2424 disclosure type of form. 2023 rolls around. What do we got? Well, we got modifications to that rule. And I think, fundamentally, the Department of Labor has said this publicly, that 8424 is just too loose. It's too easy. They need more stringent requirements. They feel like there's too many conflicts of interest and are focused on that. That's, in fact, really some of what Julie Su, the acting Secretary of Labor, had said alongside Biden at the press conference, that it's too loose. We need to tighten up some of these things, and called out fixed index annuities actually from the stage. So there's a new heightened supervision, heightened responsibility for those carriers. They don't have to serve as a financial institution like a broker-dealer would be, but in order for a producer to avail themselves to the 8424 new process, they have to have a carrier who's looking over their shoulder and engage in heightened supervision retrospective reviews. So a couple things, like what does this mean? There's a best interest standard of care. You can't say, well, I'm already doing that. Well, you might be, particularly if you're an investment advisor rep, but that best interest standard of care is slightly higher and different, I would say, than what you're doing with any IC 275, kind of your state suitability. Number two, disclosure of all the services, what you do, what you do not do, and any of your conflicts. So a classic conflict of interest that, from history of ERISA is the idea that commission or getting paid anything is a conflict. So in order to get around that, you have to have a prohibited transaction or a conflict exemption. And so one of the things is fundamentally disclosing your commission percentage and dollar amount with this new rule. Another higher requirement is going to be documenting the specific reasons for that rollover recommendation, documenting, having a process, showing all your work, that you looked at other different options, you did a cost and benefit analysis, comparing it, you're able to turn that in and it being approved. Insurance carrier having a much higher level of oversight and supervision with a pretty onerous retrospective review where they need to submit that into the regulators to meet those reporting requirements. So we're going to see what carriers are going to be doing that, what that might look like. It's a little early to be predicting, but we anticipate that, given there's independent insurance agents represent a large swath of the FIAs in particular sold, that they're going to be interested in trying to have some compliance plan. Big things have changed. I would say, there needs to be a level of impartial conduct standards in order to meet the requirements of this new proposal. So one of those classic one is the idea of commissions being either too high or creating, incentives that would cause the producer to, align their interest first ahead of the client's interest. So that's a kind of a nuanced answer without some real specific answers about what's too high, what's reasonable comp. There is a little bit of guidance in ERISA history. It kind of depends upon the market rate for commissions, honestly, and the level of services that you would be providing. So we've kind of gamed through that a bit in the past rule. We're very familiar with what that might look like going forward. But the idea of incentive compensation, incentive trips are certainly going to be under attack. I would be shocked if this rule goes through as proposed, that you would see carriers offering those kinds of things. It's unlikely given the high scrutiny with this new proposed rule. I think they're also going to see a lot more, reviewing documentation of the comparison. So if you're comparing, well, you have a 401k plan, maybe it's got an annuity option and it maybe not, but you need to be in a position to show you looked at, well, here's what you had, here's what you're paying in admin fees and charges and costs, and I'm recommending an annuity product that can provide some certainty of no loss of principal, or perhaps longevity protection with riders and so forth, and be able to document that, and that you looked at multiple carriers, multiple products, and you did a comparison to what they had in either the plan or the other IRA options, and be able to prove up that was in fact the best thing for the client. Last thing, I think that bullet got cut off a little there, Matt, I apologize, which is, I kind of say, well, so what? What happens what's the repercussion? Well, you could get sued. You could get sued by the regulators, by the consumer, disgorge profits, potential tax liability, excise taxes to the consumer that you're advising on with their IRA. So those are all big, really negative things, of course. So then let's talk about the rollover review process. And this is really, what would happen if, what you need to be doing when there's a plan rollover. So you got to take a look at that client's current plan and what the choices are, what you're recommending. You need to be able to prove up that you looked at all those different alternatives to, staying in what they have. Maybe there's a different allocation that was better. Maybe there's some other choices other than just the annuity that you're recommending. Why is it your certain percentage, rollover might have made sense, and how's that going to best meet their needs? I'd say this though, Matt. I mean, think of all the suitability forms and financial needs analysis and some of the technologies out there. I mean, I think, Matt, when you're talking to a lot of advisors, it feels like many of those guys are doing this, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. One of the questions we're getting here, Chris, and it's even been asked in today's presentation, though, is am I going to be needing to show additional illustrations? Am I going to have to show more than one with each client that I sit down with?
Yeah, that's a good question. The truth is, none of this is prescribed specifically what you have to do. We have thought through this as far as what you need to be able to prove it up. And the reality is you need to be able to show that you did evaluate other options. So I think the idea of having multiple illustrations that can, they're suiting their needs. So let's say a client is concerned about, boy, God, I don't want to outlive my money. Okay, well, what do you have that can guarantee that? Well, you got Social Security and you got annuities, right? If you want an absolute guarantee. So that's, annuity can fit those needs. And I think be able to look at the various choices that were available to you to recommend. It doesn't require you to have every carrier under the sun and look at everything. It's really the carriers, you need to have at least two, by the way, two carriers or more. And it might be that you end up, just kind of narrowing down to a few carriers that you even are contracted with that kind of meet what your needs are. That way you're not under obligation to necessarily look at everything possible. But more on that to follow. Good question. As far as, how do you look at the plan documents? So a lot of people today, I don't know, there's, IRS forms that provide plan information. Not all of that is available on an IRS basis. If it's a small plan, you might have to go to the client, have them go try to track down what all the costs and fees and choices are. So that's the kind of analysis level you're going to need to be doing. Same thing on 401k plan statements. And you'll be able to compare what's in there and why the recommended, in this case, annuity would better serve their needs, given the potential choices. I think another thing, thinking about illustrations, probably good to be having in your back pocket, things like a run a MIGA or run a SPIA, and have that as, hey, we went through that. The reason they like the indexing is because, they believe the upside of the market potential. They're looking to benefit from the upside there, and be able to document that you talked through a couple different options. Proposed carrier supervision. So this is going to get fleshed out more, but there is a rule for the carrier. They're not a co-fiduciary. So that's the good news, particularly if there is a good news coming out of this for the carriers. I think there were some concerns they might be swallowed up as a financial institution where they have a co-fiduciary duty. That's not the case, but they would need to create a compliance apparatus for you as an advisor in order to use that 8424. If they don't have it, you can't use it. So I think the carriers are going to be scrambling to see what they can build out as far as their agent review function and ensuring they're providing the apparatus so that you could meet the 8424 requirements. They do need to approve each sale. That largely is being done today through suitability, in some cases delegated suitability. It's a little bit more than that. That's just a transaction. This is more of looking at all of the potential conflicts of interest like compensation, incentives, your conduct, what products you recommended, potentially more than that too, to the extent that there was a pattern of bad sales or recommendations that didn't quite meet the expectations under there. But the win there is that they're not a fiduciary. I think changes, definitely you got to have a catalog of at least two carriers that's identified in there. So if you're on this call right now and you sell just one carrier, that's not going to work. You wouldn't be able to use the 8424 process. And then if you're a captive agent, I would definitely be calling your insurance company and asking what they're going to do. They would need to use the 2020-02, which is kind of the sole supervisor type of model. Compensation, we would expect would look more standardized. I can't tell you what that might be. It kind of gravitated to that if you had been in the industry back in 2016, 2018 period, you might have noticed that. There's since then has been some changes. I would say we might see a world where it's a little more levelized across the product portfolio there. I think by duration it could vary, and it probably should, given the level of services that you got to provide to that client over time. Incentive comp and trips are going to be in the fray. That's been identified as kind of a hot button soundbite of problems. I think incentive trips, educational trips, and personally, if they're done the right way, not necessarily a problem. However, I think they just are caught in the limelight right now, and I would expect that there's going to be a lot more scrutiny of that. The role of the IMO, we think is going to be even more important. So having a strong IMO that can really help you grow your business, whether that's through some marketing support, sales idea, training, back office support, you know, kind of having a history of being in the shoes of the producer and helping them grow the business, I think becomes even more important, particularly when you look at what kind of technology and how can you be a partner with the producer and the carrier to make sure you're meeting the compliance with the like 8424. You know, commissions as defined is what the carrier pays you, and seemingly it's at this juncture, anything outside of that is not within scope of the exemption, which means that would not be exempted and would be a conflict of interest. So we're going to navigate through that and what does that look like, but that's the way it's written. I guess, you know, questions we have is what's next? You know, where are we at? So as with any regulation, particularly federal level, it takes time. They are quick to try to get this jammed in before Biden leaves office for kind of a technical reason, if there was a risk of Congressional Review Act bouncing this. But we're in a 60-day comment period that's scheduled to end January 2nd. After that, the Department of Labor will take some meeting from you know, a lot of the big trades, evaluate those comments, and you know, last time I think there was over 3,000 comments submitted, some of them pretty depth and technical from the trades, but a lot of producers actually had comments and some consumer groups as well. So you're going to have then what would the DOL would issue, quote unquote, final rule with a, you know, could be a delayed effective date of sometime thereafter. We would expect that to get published in the Federal Register sometime in the summer of 2024 with an effective date probably a few months to follow. Not sure. It would, you know, could take what's called an interim final rule with some interim compliance pathway. And then thereafter, you know, I would expect the Department of Labor, IRS, say, do some targeted reviews. You know, Joe Biden himself had said, you know, we're going to be watching you. So, you know, I don't think this can be a rule that goes in the books. Nobody actually does any audits and checks stuff out. I know the insurance carriers that if they want to provide that 8424 apparatus are going to need to send things in to the regulators actually. And to the extent that there's any problems, they have to identify that. So I do expect that at some point, and I don't know if it's 2025, there will be some audits. There will be some reviews of this. So then you kind of say, well, what else could delay this, or where are we at? Then wasn't there a lawsuit last time that killed this? Well, there was, and that killed that rule and basically put it back into where we were. And then we had the Trump era rule. So we do have an active litigation. Our friends at FACC, you know, have sued down in Texas on actually the Trump rule and the expanded scope of who is a fiduciary. So that is an active case in the Northern District of Texas, and we'll see what develops there. We happen to be a member of FACC, so we're kind of close to that as well. This rule probably will get added into that case. I very well expect some other litigation in addition to get filed. Whether that happens now, as proposed stage, probably not. Probably wait till there's a quote final rule in the books, and then there I would think be some litigation to challenge it. Whether that's successful, don't know. You know, I think we have a Fifth Circuit decision that helps a lot because this sure seems like you know, pouring the same wine in a new bottle or something. We'll see if in fact, you know, that's what the courts would agree with. I think political pressure could make a difference on Biden, particularly if you're in a blue state, your state's rep might make a difference, or U.S. House rep might make a difference. And then I think, you know, where carriers fit in this whole thing, and whether, you know, there is a workable way to comply with this in 8424, just so you can survive. I think I would expect some carriers are going to do that for sure, and that could delay things. That could help be an impact on the final decision on what happens here. So, and this is where we might launch a polling question. I think, you know, people say, well, what can I do next? What can I get more resources? So we have that compliance kit. That's for sure a great tool. If you'd like a copy of it, it's a complimentary toolkit we have, plus the 8424 current rule compliance guide. Answer yes, we'll get that out to you. Get you a little more educated about this rule, the past rule, and what you need to do to comply. And other stuff there, Matt, if you want to close that down. But I know a lot of people are going to be interested in that, which is, you know, what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to have more webinars. You know, we'll have more and more about this. There's going to be more that comes out. And as the final rule certainly gets, you know, in the books, we're going to be ready. We're going to be advocating for you. We work very closely with all the major annuity carriers and life carriers for that matter, the major trade associations like National Association for Fixed Annuities, who aligns with ACLI and IRI, FinSec, and others. But we're going to be very close to them. Ultimately, our goal is to help provide a workable compliance pathway for you. You know, we got your back. We always will. We're the ones fighting up for you. We're the ones kind of doing the you know, behind the scenes work in DC, the state houses. We're there to fight for you. We've got a great partner in a group like NAFA, which you can join, by the way, if you're interested in trying to help a great advocacy trade group. And if you want to make a comment, there's a link there. You know, if you don't want to write all that down, you can just put that as a, you know, chat question. You'd like to make a comment. Maybe you don't like what you heard. Maybe you think it's not workable, etc. You want to do something else. You can make a comment. I can't say that it gives it a lot of weight, but you know, the more people that chime in with, you know, questions about how this is really a disruption to their business, the more I think the Department of Labor might actually listen to it. You can talk to your local elected congressman. You can, I would tell you, probably start thinking about what your sales process is. So if you have a robust technology that helps do a comparison, take a look at, is it looking at the plan rollover options? What's in there? Are you looking at, you know, is it really a robust analysis that you can document? Are you being able to prove up that you have multiple things that you looked at and you can show that in a documentation plan? We will have a lot of that. We have some tools right now that are help you to demonstrate that. I think it's probably going to be more, but we already have some of those things you can ask for to you know, document up your sale, making sure it's appropriate. But it's, you know, keep in mind, it's not just papering. This is a higher standard of care. We're talking about a fiduciary standard, much higher than what you've been accustomed to with the kind of needs-based suitability. So Matt, I think we might be wrapping up here. Are there any more questions? If you do, you can go in that chat box. Is there one or two you want to pop in? We got a few minutes here.
Yeah, Chris, are you able to take a look at the questions? I don't know if there were some that you wanted to pick out. If not, I'd be happy to.
Well, I got a couple here, and then I know we're kind of getting up at the top of the hour, so we'll get back to you on any questions. You guys feel free to put in the questions or chat box. I'm going to take a couple here, and then
and before you answer those, Chris, one of the tools that we just kind of rolled out recently that you guys may be interested in that I think is really going to be a proactive tool to helping you act as a fiduciary with these changes is called Indexalize. We just did a webinar a week ago today on it. It's on our YouTube channel, so that's IAMS Inc. on YouTube. You should check that out. That's going to help you easily compare where a client is at right now in their current situation with their investments and what a product you can present to them will do for them. So that's just one of the many tools that we'll be talking about as we get further and further into this.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. And we have a couple other tools that can go along with that. Journey Mark, if you sign up for that, you can get, and we co-op some of the money. You know, that Journey Mark is a financial planning tool that can help document, you know, and show where you're, you know, for the client, how that product better meets their needs. Retirement Analyzer is another tool that you can get complimentary here if you do business with IAMS. That's a very robust tool that, again, you know, allows you to input all of their current lineup and then see how you do better with the annuity. So if you have questions about that, go ahead and, you know, feel free to follow up with us and we'll get you information. Well, I got time for one or two here. I think one I see is, does this cover IRA to IRAs? Yes, it does. So even though those are not, you know, an IRA is actually not an ERISA plan. It's, you know, IRA is not an ERISA, but it is covered within the scope of this rule, as the regulators have written in their 800 pages. Essentially, they have the authority to regulate tax preferred plans, and indeed, they've said that that's within the scope of this. You know, another one, and I know we kind of addressed this, which is, you know, what is reasonable comp, or, you know, are incentives going to be dead? You know, reasonable comp is a tough one, and it's not defined. It's kind of in light of the level of services that you provide and kind of market rates for what commissions are. So take a 10-year annuity, maybe it's 6.5% to 7.5%, as you know, for base ages, something like that. And if that's kind of market rate and that's appropriate, given all the work that you might be doing, probably depends a little bit upon, you know, what kind of level of support you're providing and how much you know, it's time and energy you're spending and credentials you might have with that. in your interactions with that client. So I don't have a great answer for you. I do know that in the fact sheet that was press released, they even called out 6.5% as, quote, a junk fee, and connoted commissions with junk fees. So that's a soundbite. That's not what the final rule says. But I will tell you, the idea of commissions being kind of under attack is it certainly within scope here. We'll get back to you more as we get more information about what that looks like and kind of where it is reasonable. Yeah, those are the comments I had here, Matt. And I appreciate everybody's time today for joining us on this Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule update. I'm going to pass it back to you, Matt, for any wrap-up comments.
Chris, I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us. We will stay on top of this. Chris and I have talked about it. We're going to touch base with you guys regularly as more and more information comes out and as we see this unfold. So expect us to be your resource and stay on top of that. You can reach me at Matt S, M-A-T-T-S as in Sam, at IAMSinc.com if you'd like to email me directly. Chris is available, for those of you who need to ask questions as well. Your annuity sales director and your life sales directors will be in on the latest updates for this ruling. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us first. We'd like to be your resource for this, and we will keep you guys apprised as this moves along. So thank you all for joining us. If you need to get in touch with us, you've got our email and our phone number, 800-255-5055, and we will catch you on the next update. Thank you so much. Take care.